This is how Battlefield has to feel. You can really feel that in Battlefield 6 again. I was invited as one of the first in the world, you can actually say that, to play the new map Railway to Golmud. And to make content about it, as you can see now. So first of all, thanks to the EA Creator Network for letting me be a part of it, because that's what made this possible. In this video, we're taking an extensive look at Railway to Golmud, or rather the rework of it, and we're also taking a quick look at the new weapons we can play in Season 3, because we were allowed to use those as well. If I'm being completely honest, in my eyes, it wasn't the best map in Battlefield 4. Sorry. But, and here it comes, maybe a hot take, I find this version of Golmud Railway better than the one from Battlefield 4. But enough with the advanced praise, let's take a closer look at the map, the points of interest, the things you have to look at on the map so you can see what the whole thing is about. I'll start at the bottom left. In Conquest, this is the point G, the construction site or overpass construction. If you're being completely honest, these points aren't necessarily really in the gameplay of a match. Because of the train, this changes a bit more, but more on that later. This is what the whole thing looks like. Much more detailed than in the original version, with much more cover for infantry as well. Most of the time, however, you'll drive here with a vehicle to capture this point. It's a bit outside of all the action, but definitely stylish and definitely worth playing. Let's stay on the left side a bit further north. This isn't a point you can capture, it's the so-called battle site. Let's take a quick look at that for interest's sake. Here we see lots of craters and scorched earth from artillery strikes and impacts. It looks super interesting, and this too is a bit outside of the gameplay's action, I would say, but definitely nice to look at. Then on the complete opposite side of the map, we have the old farm building, or yeah, old farm it's called. That is point A in Conquest, and here we can take a look at what the destruction looks like, because I was there once when the whole thing was standing relatively intact. It looks quite nice for sure, and now we see the whole thing after a bit of war in Conquest. That is already a lot of destruction, only ruins are left standing just to demonstrate that. Yeah, left and right on the map, if you look at the north-oriented map, is more or less no man's land. You know that already from the old map. The actual combat takes place more on this central axis, and we're going to take a look at that now. We'll start at the very south, point B in Conquest, the warehouses. These are much better detailed in this version of the map. It's really fun to fight here, even as infantry, mind you, because this map used to be more of a vehicle map, but I'll get to that as we move along this central axis. A lot has changed there. Warehouses are definitely very detailed. You can destroy a huge amount here too. We have a small bridge between the warehouses where you can go back and forth. So that looks truly fantastic and makes you really want to fight here. If we go from there across the road towards the north, it was a bit empty and lacked cover in Battlefield 4. Here, it looks a bit different. We have a bit of forest, some rocks, and this substation, if I may call it that, is completely new. So here, too, there's a lot of cover, especially for infantry, of course. That's the new focus of the game, I think. You can really go at it here, but it must be said it's also just a transit point from the warehouses into the village where most of the action happens. But before we get there, we come across C in Conquest. And that is the train, of course, which gives the whole map its name. On this version of the map regarding Conquests, it's now exactly the other way around. In the Battlefield 4 version of this map, it was like this. When you captured this point, the train moved towards your own HQ. Now it's the exact opposite, because it was then very hard for the enemy to recapture this point. That's why they decided to reverse it. When you capture this point, the train moves towards the enemy HQ. So there's a lot more fighting over it. Ownership of this point will also change more often during a match. Very well done, in my opinion. The train is also much larger. You can really parkour on this train, if you want to call it that. There's an engine at the front and at the back. In the middle, some cargo. A vehicle is also standing on it. So a huge step forward compared to the Battlefield 4 map. The last 3 points can be grouped together a bit, because this is the village where the main part of the fighting, at least for the infantry, takes place. First, we have point D in Conquest, the Warlord's compound, because the whole thing was moved from China to Tajikistan. So the map, the location isn't necessarily important, but for those who are interested, that's why there's a Warlord's compound. So a warlord has his home here. Again, much better detailed than before, much more cover. There's a small landing pad even, if you see the north-oriented map, on the right side where a little bird always spawns. So you can snag another helicopter for your team here, whether you have this point or not, of course. You can also steal it when it spawns. Then we have the central piece of this map, you could say F and E. First, a construction site, because no Battlefield 6 map without a construction site, of course. And then we have a marketplace. And this is where the infantry fighting clusters the most. We have many houses, we have a few alleys, we have tight CQC gunfights, and that's definitely fun as infantry. As a tank, you have to be a bit careful, of course, because there are many angles you have to cover. You get taken out by rocket launchers very quickly here. That's why, as a vehicle driver, it's to be enjoyed with a bit of caution. Quite simple. But as I said, on this central axis from E to B, most of the fighting actually takes place. A bit more at sea, of course, depending on where the train shifts. But as I said, it just plays great. And the sandbox feeling, which you might have missed a bit in Battlefield 6, is definitely back with this map. And as I said at the beginning, for me, this is how Battlefield has to feel. Now we have 3 new weapons that we get right at the first part of Season 3. First and foremost, the Beast. Everyone still knows it from the old Battlefield parts, the M16A4. And it is definitely a beast in this part too. So you'll be shot by it often, I'd say, especially in the early days, of course. There's one innovation here. You can use an attachment to convert this weapon from burst fire, yeah, it's normally a burst weapon, to fully automatic. I'll be honest, for my part, I've always been super bad with burst fire weapons. In shooters, I converted it immediately, and that thing is just insane. Yeah, the attachment costs 25 points, but in my eyes, it's worth it. At mid-range, I think that thing is almost unbeatable. Then another new LMG, the RPK-74M. Another version of the RPK. That could be very interesting, especially on this map, because you occasionally have longer distances here. It has really very little recoil, a bit of spread, that has to be said. Time to kill isn't quite as fast, since it's very accurate compared to the other weapons, but it's definitely really fun too. Then we have a sniper rifle, L115 or 115 is the name of the thing. Yeah, it's a sniper rifle. So once you've dialed yourself in with any specific sniper rifle, every sniper rifle is somehow good. It's definitely intended more for long range, maybe not necessarily a new mini scout, but yeah, it's a sniper rifle. You can't say all that much about it being totally overpowered or totally crazy or whatever. Once you're dialed in yourself with it, it's definitely a cool rifle. So now especially the jet pilots among us have complained a bit that there's always too little space around the playable areas, so that you can't even conduct a proper dogfight with the jets because you're always being locked, etc. That is completely different here on this map. Not only is this map the largest that has come out in Battlefield 6 so far, 4 times the size of Marek Valley, no, it's also by far the largest in terms of flight zone size, because around this infantry or vehicle playable area, a giant territory extends where you can fly. I flew so far to the east and the north with a jet until I was actually outside of the combat zone. That really took a long time. I was really, really far away from I'll call it the actual map. So I checked, it was I think over 2 kilometers to the next point, so to speak, that was on the map. So the area is truly gigantic, and you can finally plan proper approaches and maybe dogfight a little bit without being consistently disturbed. You also notice that during the gameplay, the jets were mostly busy with each other during our session. That's usually not the case on the smaller maps or on the other Battlefield maps. So that's a huge plus for this map. Besides, it just looks fantastic. You just have to say that too. The old version from Battlefield 4 was a bit, well, not so colorful, a bit gray on gray, a bit desaturated. That is completely different here. It looks really stylish with the poppy fields, the houses in the city, and so on. It all looks really polished and cool. You have a lot of cover, you can destroy a lot. So, the Battlefield feeling, which I also missed very much at times in Battlefield 6. This sandbox feeling is back, I think. This sandbox feeling that you can also try things out, etc. I only remind you of that famous clip where a group of young soldiers, so to speak, basically blew their tank up in the air, which then shot a jet. It happened on this map. on the old version, of course. Maybe you can finally pull something like that off again on this version, because as I said, there's enough space for everyone. Those who want super crazy CQC action just go into the village. All those who maybe want a bit more vehicle gameplay stay a bit outside. Backflips with motorcycles, etc. Everything possible without, being disturbed. You can simply put it that way. There's just a lot of space on this map for shenanigans and Battlefield stuff. Finally, I definitely believe a lot of people will have a lot of fun on this map. It feels like Battlefield again, and that is extremely important to me as a longtime fan. And I'm really looking forward playing this. Of course, if you don't want to miss any more content, then just subscribe to the channel. It's simple. A click isn't for nothing, but it's free of charge. If you want to see more content, there's another video here on the screen that might interest you as well. And we'll definitely see each other on Railway to Golmud in Season 3 of Battlefield 6. I'm sure this map will lure many people back into this game. See you on the battlefield.